Hi there, and welcome to today's episode with such a lovely, sweet, insightful, wisdomful lady. Today we have Georgina Williams-Hodgson joining us from sunny Newcastle. And Georgina is the founder of nousana and a creator of 4040 program. But most importantly, she is helping people align their frequency with simple science meets ancient wisdom practices. She blends practical habit design with deeper questions about the meaning of the world and life energy, the way we think, we speak, we live. And this is such a rich and insightful conversation, talking a little bit about or Georgina's origin story, looking at, what was her crack in the door moment that started her journey, how we align our frequency in life, how we can build simple habits, bring in some simple tools for us busy humans that allow us to go from overwhelm into alignment. So grab a cuppa, sit down, relax. This is a fantastic conversation with a wonderful human being.
But before we get on to this beautiful conversation all about alignment, I want to remind you about our YouTube channel and subscribing. Please do subscribe because we really want these conversations to reach out as far as possible. And of course, the algorithms like to know who subscribes, and it's not about catching you or anything, but it is about the reach. And we have so many people who do watch our videos, but we're not getting that reach. So we need your help. Please hit that subscribe button, hit those like buttons, hit those buttons because it will really help us to get out there so that these conversations that we have reach the right people who need to hear them. But now, hit that button, subscribe, and we will carry on with this beautiful conversation.
Hi, Georgina. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hi, Lenka. I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good, and I am so excited for this conversation today. Since we've met, what, couple months ago now, back in June in Newcastle, actually in Sutherland, where you were one of the panelists talking and at the UK Startup Week hosted in Sutherland. And I did not expect anyone like you to be on that stage, to be talking about your journey and your experience, because it was a small business startup, and you are a small business startup owner, but you are so much more. And I can't wait to learn more about your background and your journey and your wisdom and your worldview and insight onto what the hell is happening in the world around us.
That's very sweet of you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so to give Natalie and our listeners a little bit of a context to, why are we so excited to have you here? What people can look forward to listening. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who you are, what you do, and maybe we can start hinting on where did this journey for you started?
Yeah, so I am Georgina. I am currently based in the northeast of England. I have a background in marketing, and recently I have been on a natural health science slash spirituality journey, and that has really shaped my work over the past couple of years. So my business, nousana, was officially registered in January of this year, and it's just been a whirlwind journey since then.
I'm intrigued to know then what got you, what was the trigger point to get you more interested to really start researching, be the health, be the spirituality. I often am curious about the origin story, whether some people are more spiritual since the beginning, even as children, even as young teens, they're more in tune with the nature, with the world, with the universe. But for most of us, there is either one major breaking point, or we have couple breaking points throughout our lives and careers and health that just start cracking open the little bubble that we live in, and we start wondering and questioning and, poking into, like, is this it? Is this the reality, or is there more? So I would love to know, what was the journey for you?
I mean, I couldn't have put it better myself, really. I do feel like we all kind of, or certainly from my experience, I was certainly living in a bubble. So to take you back to where it kind of all sparked. So I was living in the Northeast. I had a lovely top floor apartment in a nice gated community. I had a brand new car and a fancy job, and everything was kind of going how it's supposed to go. And I kind of looked around my life and I felt empty, even though all of these socially acceptable boxes that you're supposed to tick were almost crossed off, you know? So I sat down with a notepad and a pen, and that was where my love of journaling first began, even though I totally didn't understand it at the time. And I started writing out what I wanted to achieve from my little life on this planet. And I came up with three goals. So I wanted to travel, I wanted to build a business, and I wanted to move down south. So the very next day, I handed in my notice at work. I got rid of the car, got rid of the flat, and I booked a one-way flight to Australia via Singapore. Um, so that was kind of the start of the journey for me. While I was in Australia, I was in a place called Noosa, and I was really hungover. So, and the sun was beating down. And in all my wisdom, I had this tiny little bottle of water with me, and I decided to go hiking up this national trail. So I was exhausted. My whole body was saying, stop, please turn around. This isn't safe. But there was a tiny little voice somewhere inside that just kept saying to me, just one more step, just one more step. So I listened and I kept going. And I noticed there was a load of trees on my left. And I kind of ventured through them because I'm a bit of an explorer. And as I did, I was whacked in the face with this panoramic view of the ocean. And what happened to me at that point, I really struggled to put into normal human language. I felt this immense sense of overwhelming gratitude. I was grateful for myself, for my working body, for the fact that I was here having this experience. I felt grateful for my family, my friends, but also I felt grateful for the planet. I felt grateful for the fact that humans are able to experience emotions and that we're able to form connections. I also felt grateful for the birds in the trees and even the snakes. I felt grateful for everything. And I stood there for a long time and I just cried. It was a life-changing moment for me, for sure. Um, and then after that, when I returned back, I moved down south and I set up a business. So I ticked those things that I'd wanted to do off, which was amazing. I'm so lucky that I could do that. And while I was down south, we had lockdown. So I was about 300 miles away from home. I wasn't around any close friends or any family. And I was going through a bit of a messy breakup, a painful breakup. And then the world shut down, and whole weeks would go by where I didn't see another human face. So yeah, I was working by myself and living by myself. And that was it was a really, really difficult time for me. I self-medicated, I was drinking all of the time. It was a real achievement for me if I got out of bed and had a shower. Um, and I just I went so low. I went so far down. That was a real turning point. And that for me was where I kind of realized that something had to change, something had to be done right now. It was now or never, literally. Um, so I started to research. I actually had a conversation with a friend from from up north, and we were talking about COVID, obviously, what was going on in the world. And that conversation really opened me up to the idea of researching more and figuring out what was going on. So, because of that, I started on this quest that hasn't ended. Um, and I started learning all sorts of different things. So, first of all, I'd heard that depression was a chemical imbalance. So, I wanted to learn more about that. I wanted to know more about the food I was eating, about the people I was speaking to and the kinds of conversations I was having, about the things I was watching on TV and how they were impacting how I felt about the world. And learning about food and the impacts it has on the human body led me to learning more about natural health and the pharmaceutical industry, which then led me on to learning about government, our local government in the UK, and then global governments, the structures that's going on behind there. And that that path of discovery, I now know, was what saved me, because every single time I was learning something new that was challenging my existing thought patterns, I was getting a big smash of dopamine. And it was kind of like a wrestle in my mind between the world that I had previously lived in, the one that I thought was real, and then this new world that I was exposing myself to. And I got a little bit addicted to learning at one point, and I was just cramming, my brain with so much information. And then by the time lockdown was over, I emerged as a different person. So the social circles that I was involved in, I found it really difficult to kind of connect with my old life in the same way because I was different. And yeah, after that, I decided that I had to do something with all of this knowledge. It seemed unfair of me to kind of keep it all to myself. So the idea to start a business to help share this knowledge with people who were interested came about. And yeah, that's where the idea for nousana came from.
Wow, what a journey. And thank you so much for sharing, so honestly and so openly and taking us to the real deep, dark end beginning, the end and the beginning of this story to get and appreciate what you've been through and then how you've emerged. And I totally resonate with the more you grow and learn, and as your mind opens up and your worldview shifts, it is sometimes you go so off the rails, so to speak, of your usual self that then your previous friends and connections and colleagues are like, you just really struggle to find and reconnect with the people. But then a new whole world of incredible human beings who are on the same frequency, who are aligned with your perspective, who appreciate and see this new vision, this new wisdom, that want to hear that emerges. So I'm so excited to be able to get a little bit of a sneak peek into that. And I would love to have the opportunity to chat a little bit more about then what is it that you and Nusana do? What are the challenges that you help people with? What are the tools and modalities and solutions that you bring in? What I know is that you have this kind of a science meets ancient wisdom approach, that you really take all the learning that you started with science And somewhere along the way, as it often is, when you go deeper into science, the world of ancient wisdom and the world of spirituality is opening up at the same time. So could you take us a little bit more into, what it is that you do, what it is that you're helping people with, what are the challenges that people may have, and a little bit behind then what this journey has led you to teach and share and empower people with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you're so right. I think the more that you learn about either ancient wisdom or modern scientific findings, they do cross over quite often, much more often than what you would initially think before you start researching these topics. Um, so Nusana at the moment, it offers one-to-one coaching services with me. I also do online and in-person events. Um, the most recent of which was a big announcement because we have launched 4040, which is a brand new, let's call it a micro coaching system. So what it focuses on are the four key pillars of what I believe are the most integral parts of how we show up and how we feel in ourselves and how we carry ourselves through our day to day. So to give you a little bit of background on those, the four key pillars, I believe, are what we consume. So that's not just food, but that's also media, that's music, that's the types of conversations we're around, everything that goes in, basically, what we consume. And involved in that is also what we put on our skin, because that's such a huge topic as well. The next segment is what we think. So not just what we think, but why we think that way. And I think so many of us are operating on autopilot. And because we go through a schooling system where we're all given lots of facts and dates and lots of things through history to remember, but nobody ever really teaches us how to use the most important tool that we have, which is our brain. And it is a tool, and we can shape it and we can change it, and we have that opportunity to do so. We don't just have to accept that it is how it is, and that's kind of it, which I fear that I feel like a lot of people do that. That's certainly what I was doing before. And the next part, so it's what you consume, what you think, what you speak. So words carry vibration, and every word that we speak can either have a positive or a negative impact on ourselves, the people around us, and the way that we see the world. So I recently learned that the brain processes, it's something crazy like 10 billion bits of sensory information a second. But obviously, we couldn't process all of that because that would be insane. So our brains they filter out what we take in, and that's through the RAS system, the reticular activating system. And we have the power to choose what those 10 bits of information are that we process. And when we really investigate what kind of filter we're processing the world through looks like, we can then identify where we might be able to make changes or improvements to help ourselves to experience a better life. And the final segment of 4040 is what we do. So this really focuses on the good feeling hormones and chemicals in the body and in the brain. And I guess it's kind of taking agency over how we can understand that what we choose to do, and very importantly, who we choose to do those things with, has such a huge impact on how we see the world and our place in it. And I believe that these four core pillars are kind of like the structure of a house. So if one of them is off balance, the whole building feels it. And I think that they're all equally important. And that's why I launched 4040. So that was a little bit long-winded, but I kind of wanted to give you guys an overview of what that service is.
It was really interesting to see, get some of the core beliefs that you have that you're now putting in practice in your business, because those come from your beliefs, that come from your own journey, your own realization, things you're implementing in your own life that are essential. And obviously now we're talking about how it is packaged and how it is presented maybe to the people out there, and giving our listeners a little bit of a teaser if some of these things resonate, that maybe they need a little bit more alignment in their own life. And I know that for you, kind of the word alignment, or aligning our lives, our frequencies, our vibrations, is a big part of what you do and what you believe in. So I would love to get a little bit more of your perspective on the whole aligning your frequency for your life, because you touched on it already, saying that we're looking to have happier, healthier, more fulfilling lives. It's exactly what this podcast is all about. So I'm curious to know, in your experience, in your perspective, what the aligning of frequencies and aligning of our lives actually means in practice. Like, how would you describe it?
So I think that the term aligning frequencies is it's quite broad, and it's different for every person. I don't think that there's a right or a wrong way to do things. I think that we can learn key elements, we can learn key tools that can help us individually as we face challenges and setbacks in our lives, that can help to keep us on a I guess a more even keel. Um, but I'm not really one for thinking that there's kind of this mystical in the sky thing that we need to achieve. I don't really think that. I think that we are all responsible for ourselves, and that I believe it's in the micro actions that we make that changes how aligned we feel to ourselves and to our purpose. And it's kind of like, I was just having this conversation with somebody before, and he asked me a very similar question. So, how do you know that something is aligned or not? And for me, it's a very clear feeling. But before, um, I wouldn't have been able to access that feeling because it was so covered up with all of the noise and the things that just don't matter, the things that we all get distracted by all of the time. So one of the things that was a real turning point for me, when I came up with the term aligning frequencies, is I started looking into, as part of my research, near-death experiences. And what I discovered was so many people around the world, regardless of their background, regardless of their religion, they would come back, come back from a near-death experience, all of a sudden having this newfound clarity and a feeling of purpose or direction. And the things that used to worry them before just don't anymore. And I remember learning this for the first time and thinking, wow, like this is amazing. And I wanted to try and find a way that we could kind of bottle this experience without, I mean, almost dying to have it. And that was where the idea for Quantanamo came about. So Quantanamo was an in-person event. It's part of a series, and the first one was focused on letting go of fear. So when we look at facing the biggest fear of all, so our own mortality, once we step through that and face it head on, instead of doing what most of us do in the West, which is kind of look the other way and pretend it's not going to happen. When we force ourselves to face it and break through that fear, there's very little left to be afraid of. And I do believe that learning that and the personal experience that I had where I was really struggling I do believe that going through that really helped me to break free, because there's no way that I would have been able to do the things that I'm doing now had I not faced that ultimate fear. And I think once we give ourselves the freedom to remember that we might not know all that there is to know, it opens us up to a whole world of opportunity. And it's magic. It's magic.
I'm loving this conversation and just listening to your journey and everything. And when you were mentioning, lockdown and doing the research and looking, I've called it, going down that rabbit hole. It's massive, and we did it, my husband and I as well. We were just what's going on, what's happening, and finding so much. And through that, you know, rabbit hole and digging and finding and learning, is realizing how powerful we are as humans, what we've been what's been hidden from us, what's not been encouraged for us to learn. And like you said, the frequencies and, just finding ways that what we put into us has an impact on our emotions, on our physical bodies, on our frequencies. And with those pillars that you were talking about, and everything is impacted. And when you really start to dig deep and to look at what is what we are told and taught that is good for us, or what we should do and the way we should think, everything has been like suppressed. Is instead of teaching us about the power that we have as humans, it's almost like it's been suppressed, and no, you don't have any power, and you're not clever. Your brain is just this thing that's got to regurgitate maths or recite sonnets and poetry that you learn at school, instead of really starting to dig deep into how powerful is our brain, how powerful are we as humans, what can we do if we look after ourselves and really take that responsibility of ourselves to be the best version of us, because we're not just these physical bodies that we have, which about 95% of people don't even like their own physical bodies, and they're too fat, too tall, too short, too white, too black, too skinny, too whatever it is, and never even being owning the physical body, but also the emotional person that we are, the spiritual person that we are, and the capacity of what we have to offer into the world is huge. And we are just like a grain of sand on a massive beach. That's who we think we are, instead of realizing actually we can be the whole beach and all those sand grains that we want to be, because we have that power. But that's been taken away from us through education, through food, through medication, through everything. And then we just feel that we are these little powerless, in incorrect and wrong people, whereas actually we're not. And one of the things that I really took on this sort of rabbit holes that I went into is the power of sovereignty, and to really own, who am I? And I have the power to choose what I feed myself, to choose what I put on my skin, to choose who I hang out with. I might not necessarily have the choice of who my parents and my family are, but I get to choose with how much time I want to spend with them. I get to choose, everything in our lives. We can choose. We always have choice. And even not making a choice is a choice, because then we've chosen not to choose. And I loved how you said when you came out of lockdown, you were a different person. You didn't know your connections didn't know how to be with you, because it's almost like one person went in and a total stranger came out. And I think that's happened to a lot of people. And I know that happened to myself and my husband. We just came out as different people, and it was all of a sudden finding a new way and new connections, which has been it's been an interesting journey over the past 5 years. I'll give you that. And we've learned a lot. But one thing that has always amazed me is the capacity that we have as humans on what we can do, right down to the quantum. How we think and the frequencies that we put out and allow ourselves to absorb can have a huge impact on us. It can help us to, I don't know, fly, or it can put us into this really dark place where we think, oh my God, I don't know how to get out of this. I don't know what I'm doing, and just spiral into this like black pit of despair. But yet we have that capacity to bring ourselves out of that. We have the capacity to heal ourselves through, whatever works. And this is something that I've found really fascinating over the years, to really learn and realize that we are not that one grain of sand on the beach, but we actually are all the sand on the beach. We just don't know how to be that sand. We're just so used to these little boxes that we tick. Yes, went to school. Yes, went to university. Yes, got that job. Yes, get that paycheck. Yes, bought that house. Yes, got that right car. Yes, because we've got to have the right car. Remember, we've got to fit into our society. And what we end up doing is we mold ourselves into something that doesn't fit us, that doesn't sit right with us. And then we get ill. The aches and pains start, depression, mental illness, physical illness, because we trying to contort ourselves into this tiny little square box, but we're not little square boxes. I don't know, just shapes of all different shapes and sizes, literally. So I'm loving this conversation, because it's always good to know that there's somebody else out there who's gone down that little rabbit hole and found information and found out new ways of thinking, and realizing that we are so much more than we are. And I'd love if you could really sort of takes an example, maybe of the food, or maybe of something that you have found has really made an impact for you. Because I know some of our listeners are most probably starting down a rabbit hole or halfway down a rabbit hole. Some of them might even be right in that rabbit hole, like little Alice in Wonderland, just tiny in this huge black hole. But sometimes it just takes listening to somebody's story, or hearing what they did, one little thing that they did, because it can be really scary when you think of all that stuff, and it's like this overwhelm of, oh my God, I can't do that. But then if it's just down to one thing or a few little things to help somebody to just think, I can do that. And it sort of gets on the start, because when you are faced with this realization of, oh my word, look at that. It's too much, and it can be really scary. But if you're faced with, just do this one thing, or just, have you thought about this? It's like, that I can do. Because sometimes we just need the little bits of step, or the little idea, the thought, because that's where it starts, and then keep going. So I'd love if you could just maybe talk a little bit about how it is for you coming out. I know you've scratched on the surface, saying, that you changed and you realized, but then what little things did you do to help you to maintain that? Because yes, we can look down that rabbit hole and go, hell no, I'm not even going down that way, shut it, and then carry on putting ourselves in those boxes, because it's too big, it's too scary. So if you can just share some of the things that have kept you going and keeps you going, to help our listeners to navigate that rabbit hole.
Thank you, first of all. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was really lovely to hear. Really nice to know that I'm not alone as well, and that there are more people out there who are, who've been doing their own digging and going down their own rabbit holes. Because you're right, when you do it, it is absolutely terrifying. And that's because I think we form a huge part of what we believe our identities to be around these structures that all of a sudden now we're learning information that then threatens those. We don't know who we are without them. So we tend to, or we can certainly retreat because it feels much safer. But the trouble is when we do that, because we've already had a peek behind the curtain, we're never going to be fulfilled without figuring out more of what's behind there, I don't think, because we've already kind of peeled it back a little bit. So we're aware that there's something there. I think for me, some of the things that really help me to do is, I mean, this is nothing new, but it's something that is absolutely proven. It's focusing on gratitude and small wins. So a small win might be something like, I don't know, chopping the vegetables for your dinner. It could be anything. A small win can be anything that you can celebrate yourself for. And I'm a big believer that we should celebrate ourselves way more than we do. Because when you do something kind for somebody, when you do something kind for your future self, you're putting a little bit of good out into the world. And I think it's all too easy to in this world of ours to kind of feel like we are just one grain of sand and we don't really have much value and we're just kind of trundling along and going to the job and doing the thing, and we've lost connection with ourselves. And what you said before about realizing our true power, that is literally what Nusana is about. So for me, I believe that reconnecting with yourself in any way that feels right to you. So personally, I like to get my bare feet on the ground as much as possible. I like to eat raw food, raw, healthy fruit, vegetable foods. I like to journal. And every single day, without fail, I will recall at least three things that I'm grateful for. When I first started doing this, I remember thinking, well, what could I possibly be grateful for? And now I could easily fill 2 pages because it goes from um now I could talk about I'm great right now. I'm grateful for the sun being on my face. Even though it's making it a little bit difficult for me to see right now, I'm so grateful for it because that's a beautiful thing. I'm feeling the warmth from it. I'm grateful to be sitting here with you guys right now, to be on a chair, to have legs, to stand up if I want to. I'm grateful for everything. I'm grateful that there's water, there's food, there's cutlery, there's plates. It's endless. And I saw something the other day that really stuck with me, and it said, "Don't forget that if somebody else from a different place in the world woke up tomorrow in place of you, in your place, they would consider all of their prayers had been answered." And I think it's just a matter of perspective. So, because we live in this state of autopilot and scarcity and fear and stress, we tend to overlook so many of the things that we have to be so grateful for. And really focusing on that and making it a huge part of your life is a major tip, I would say, to focus on because it really helps to get you through the dark and scary times.
Gratitude is very powerful, and it has that positive frequency that the more you are grateful for, the more of a positive frequency that you put out. And one of our guests, we had a conversation, and it was, one of the frequencies is love. I mean, love is such a powerful emotion, and I'm not just talking about, loving our families or our partners or our pets or a close friend, but it's that frequency of love that just has this positive impact on, and it's actually the most powerful frequency that you can put out there because it eradicates fear, it eradicates hate, it eradicates all the negativity. But it's almost like we are scared to put out this frequency of love because it can put us into a position of vulnerability, or we can think we are more vulnerable, whereas actual fact we are more powerful. And this is something that gratitude does. And I know that gratitude has been around the coaching industry for years, just be grateful, find things to be grateful about. But there's so much power behind that because when you really are grateful and you really look at it, that frequency that you're putting out is really positive, that it almost helps you to absorb the next grain of sand next to you and absorb the next one. And not as I'm going to squish you, but just realizing that you are this beach and not just this grain of sand that, as you said, is insignificant. This grain of sand has so much power because it can be the whole beach. And I think this is what gratitude does. It really can send out that frequency, which has that power to heal. It has that power to align yourself, but help others to align. Because when you reach out with somebody with I'm going to say love in your heart, and you reach out and you're friendly and you smile and you're positive, you get that back. And people are attracted to you, and they want to be around you and they want to, almost bathe in your glow in a way. And I know I'm trying not to go too cliche, but I wanting to try and use my words, which are not working for me at the moment. But the thing is, when you like that, but if you have this frequency of hate or negativity and just everything's horrible and are just down in that like black hole, you don't attract anything other than more black hole and more negativity. And if you think when you walk into a room and you look out and you're thinking, okay, what group of people am I going to go to, or who am I going to approach? I don't know about you, but I would go to the person who's smiling, who radiates light almost, as opposed to the person who's scowling in the corner. And I'm thinking, I don't want to have a conversation with that person because they scare me. It's just dark scowling and really negative vibes that you get off them. And it's a way to almost push people away when you're that negative. And yes, you do attract negativity. But if you think about the love and negativity or positive and negativity, the positive can absorb that negativity and change it to a positive, which is something that I really love. Whereas negativity can't always do the same the other way around. And that is why I realized that when I realized how powerful we are. And this is where gratitude plays such a powerful role, because if you are feeling vulnerable or down, we are human at the end of the day. We are human. And we do have emotions and we do feel sad. We do feel depressed. We do sometimes succumb to negativity through tired, stress, whatever it is. That gratitude practice can help to stave it off, to like, okay, I'm having a bad moment. I'm allowed a bad moment. I'm allowed to feel like this. It's okay. But you can still find that frequency of love, that frequency of light. And this is why gratitude is such a powerful tool. But unfortunately, it's been used so much in the coaching industry that it's become this thing that you do to tick a box without actual realization of why you're doing it and is actually how it helps, because it's not, you want to be more positive, do your gratitude journal, write those 3 things and do it without that real understanding of it. And that was something for me is when I realized that gratitude wasn't just about writing my three things I'm grateful for in the evenings, but it's actually something that's inside, it's ingrained, it's not a conscious thing, it becomes an unconscious thing. And I think that is where it's so powerful. But yet, you got to start somewhere. And I think that's where the gratitude, writing is a good thing. But also, I mean, Lenka and I, we're big on thinking and understanding and knowing about it a bit more. So I really tried to look into why do the gratitude journal? What's the point?
Mm.
What's behind it? And this is one of those things I found down that rabbit hole that I was looking down in. And is so much more to it. But it's not spoken like that. It's just about be more positive, be positive and everything will be great in your life. No, it's not about that. It's about sending out that frequency and sending out that vibe so that you can start to attract the right people and not succumb to the it's not succumb to something when you realize, as you said, peek behind that curtain and realizing wow, what the hell is going on? But when you really have that gratitude, it's like, okay, yeah, there's some stuff going on, but I'm okay because I'm powerful, because I'm sovereign, because I am the whole beach. I'm not just that grain of sand. I can deal with this. I can do it. And I think, and this is why your steps are really powerful because gratitude has so much more than just write those three things on your list and go to sleep and yes, all will be right with the world. It's more
Yeah.
powerful than that. And I think when you realize that, especially for our listeners, when you realize the power behind it, it doesn't make it a chore to tick off your to-do list, but it actually becomes more ingrained and there's a reasoning behind it that is more powerful than just when you've done your three gratitudes, you'll be more positive. There's so much more to it. So thank you for sharing your steps in that and I love how you were saying the sunlight warming your face and especially in the UK, we don't get a huge amount of it and we're going into autumn, so we've got to make the most of it. So thank you so
Exactly.
much for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you. When you were speaking there, there were so many things in my brain were firing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I completely agree with everything that you said. Um, I think that all too often it's really easy for us to focus on familiar hell over the unfamiliar heaven. And whatever we choose to focus on expands. So when we look at something like gratitude, you're right, it does become ingrained and it changes the way you see the world. At the beginning, I think it does need to be something as small as just listing off three things that you might be grateful for. And then over time, you do really notice the big shifts happening in your life. And that's because I believe you start to approach challenges in a different way from a different place because the way that you're seeing the world is different then. So it's kind of like the problem solving thing it goes back to in my mind. So if you let's say you're presented with a brick wall in front of you, lots of us, many of us would see the brick wall and feel sad about it and not do much else and then maybe go home. But the gratitude element would be grateful that there's a challenge there. And then that would be able to help us to find if there's a way over it, under it, through it, around it, see if there's another way. And I think that really it impacts so much. It impacts all of our choices, our words, the way that we interact with other people. One of the things that really, I guess, stood out to me when I was learning about the power of gratitude and the power of love and our bioelectric field and its impact on the people around us was that there was a study done by the Heart Math Institute, and they put two people in two separate rooms, and they put EEG and ECG monitors on one person, and the other person, they asked them to send we'll call them the sender and the receiver. So the sender was asked or directed to send feelings of love and gratitude to the receiver. And every single time they did, the EEG and the ECG picked up those feelings of love and gratitude in the receiver's heart. And the coherence was reflected in that, which is just amazing because that means that what literally what you said, what we are feeling inside, it doesn't stay within the body. It radiates out and it impacts everybody around us. And again, going back to that point earlier, that's why I think it's so important who we choose to spend our time with as well, because if our field can affect them, theirs can also affect us.
Oh my gosh, I love this. And you're really touching on so many different areas that I love seeing coming together. So I'm, sensing an influence. There is a little bit of neuroscience in there. There is a little bit of quantum physics talking about energies and vibrations, because we now know that we are, if we take the quantum physics approach, everything is energy. We're just different levels of vibrations, and applying that to biology, how it reflects in not only our brain, and we know that our brains have different frequencies and different way of thinking will produce different wavelengths of energy, but also our hearts and our organs and our every single little cell of our body is vibrating at a certain level of certain energy. So I love bringing in different aspects of science, be it the physics, be it the neuroscience, be it the biology, but I also love this underlying feeling of the ancient wisdom. And I would love to tap more into maybe who were your influencers, what was the research that you've done into the ancient wisdom that then aligned with this modern. Because we hear, and I'm glad for it, a little bit more and more about neuroscience and the modern research and these things that allow us to understand ourselves better. But sometimes the ancient wisdom in there feels like we're putting it aside, like, oh, this is the old rubbish, things like whatever. We now have these cool, fancy tools and we can do science with, brain waves and we can measure things. And I love the fact that what you do is you're bringing in both. So I'm curious where it comes to the ancient wisdom, like where do you draw your inspiration? What were the influencers? What were the books and scripts and guides that maybe have made an impact on you and that you are still immersed in learning from?
There's so many. I would probably be here all day trying to remember them all, but there's so many different influences that have really been huge in that aspect of my learning. Um, Alan Watts, obviously, is an absolute legend, and that's the one that springs to mind when I think of who's been really integral in my learning journey. But there's so many. I think one of the because I've also researched into different religions as well. So it wasn't just one type of ancient wisdom that I was looking into. I wanted to kind of give myself as much of a rounded view as I possibly could. And one of the stories that really sticks out was when I was learning a bit more about Buddhism. And that was from a book called what was it called? You Are Not What You Think. I think it's called Don't Believe Everything You Think. That was it. And there's a very interesting, well, there's loads of interesting stories inside this particular book. But one that really stuck out to me was, so there was a young monk in a monastery and he was getting really frustrated that every time he tried to meditate, he would get disturbed by the rustling trees or the birds, or if there was a cat nearby, or people laughing in the distance. And he was getting really frustrated that he couldn't find the peace, the external peace, to meditate and find the internal peace. So he went to his teacher and explained that he was getting really angry about this. And the teacher said to him, "Do you know what's really making you angry?" And the young monk was so confused. He was like, yes, of course I do. It's all of the external things that are making me really angry. So a few days went by and he started to look for alternative places where he could go to meditate to try and find this outer peace. And he ended up going to a lake and he found a boat. So he thought, I know, I'll go out on this boat to the middle of the lake and then nobody can disturb me. So he did, and he meditated successfully. And he was really happy about this. And I think that this went on for some time. And then one day he was out on the middle of the lake meditating and he felt a nudge from another boat into his boat. And he felt himself get really angry. Thought, who's disturbing me? I've come all of this way to try and find this peace. I feel really angry that somebody has disturbed me. And he got up to shout at the person who was in the other boat. And then there was nobody in it. It had come loose from the dock and it had just bumped into his boat. And when he saw that there was nobody in there, the anger dispersed. And that's a core theme of this book. And it really stood out to me because most of our suffering, not pain, because pain and suffering are two different things, but most of our suffering comes from our own thoughts. So when the boat was empty and he saw it was empty, the anger left him. He just didn't feel it anymore. And if it was truly the external thing that had the power over him, that anger wouldn't have gone anywhere. But it was his internal thoughts that was causing him to suffer. And I think that that can be applied in our whole lives. There's so many stories from ancient wisdom, just like this one, that are just as fascinating to me anyway.
I love that story. When you look at these stories or these analogies of from ancients, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's the Native Americans, whether it's Egyptian or whatever, they have these fables in a way to teach us, and the wisdom in that is really powerful because even though something is from thousands of years ago, it is really relevant today. And one of the journeys I've been on is Native American wisdom, is really trying to learn a little bit about their culture and what guides them and what helps them. And it's this power of who we are. It always comes back to who we are and these stories of who we are. And even though, you sort of think, I'm going very cliche now, but when you sort of think the Native Americans, with loincloths and scalping people's heads and violence, but there's so much more to it. Their wisdom stands even now in modern days where we have everything. We don't hunt. We don't hunt for food. I mean, we just go to the local grocery shop and get our food. But we've lost that connection, but their power still stands. And a lot of their wisdom also helps to guide us into the future because they have teachings that say if this happens, this will happen. If we do this, this is going to happen. And you think, how did they know that 500-600 years ago? How did they know that in, the 21st century, this is what we were going to be like? But it's through wisdom, and this is something that I really love about ancient wisdom. You can even go to the fairy tales, Grimm's fairy tales. There's
Mm,
stories in there, there's wisdom in there. You go to uh, pagans, you go to early Christianity, you can go to Judaism. It doesn't matter where you go. You can find this wisdom that is so relevant now. And like Lenka says, we like our little science toys. They all new and shiny and bright. Whereas ancient wisdom might be a bit dull, it might be a bit battered and used like an old tool. but the two can really combine. And I think when we bring the two together, it helps us so much to help us to understand who we are. Because we do learn more and we do learn from science. We have learned so much about how the brain works. But the ancient Egyptians knew that already. They knew how the brain worked. We only think, oh, wow, this is new. We know how this works. But they knew that already, 6,000 years ago. But it's really nice that now these two sciences, in a way, are coming together and connecting. But it's being open to realizing that they connect. Because I do know some scientists won't even go down the ancient route. It's like, nope, that doesn't exist. And some ancient wisdom people won't go down the science route. But I think it's really important to connect the two. And one of my favorite authors is Greg Braden because he brings all of them together, science, religion, and ancient wisdom. He brings it all together and he explains it in a way that helps if you're not a scientist. He does really guide and I love how he connects those together. So your story from that book about the boat bumping on, I think that is so relevant whether you're sitting in your house at work driving in a car is where are your thoughts going, what are you thinking, what's triggering you to be angry and all that. So thank you for sharing that. It was a really beautiful story and I've written down the title of that book. So.
Oh, I'll send you a list. There's so many. I'm really glad you liked it. Yeah, I think one of the things that many ancient practices or ancient wisdom speaks about is our deep connection to the earth. And that is something that we in 2025 we've really lost. We all spend most of our time indoors and staring either at screens or in offices under fluorescent lights, and we're disconnected from the earth. And we came from the earth, and so to me, it's no great wonder that we can be healed by natural things that also come from the earth instead of I I want to be careful here because I'm not saying that there isn't a place for Western medicine, because I do believe that there is. But I don't think that it should be necessarily the first port of call. I think that if there's an opportunity and if it's sensible and safe to do so, there are so many natural, I don't like using the word alternative because I kind of see it as the original medicine. I see pharmaceutical medicine as the alternative. There's so many natural options that could potentially do a load more good than they would bad, and they don't come with a whole load of side effects that might lead to other problems further down the road. Um, so yeah, I think that connection to the earth is one of the major things that we have lost, and it is fascinating to see how modern scientific findings are catching up to what ancient wisdom has always known. And I believe that was by design, that we became disconnected by design. And I think that when we really take responsibility for digging into it ourselves and opening up all of this knowledge that has been lost or hidden, or whatever the term is that you want to use, it has not been made easily available to us over recent years. I think when you start looking into all of that, it really does change your whole perspective on the world and what's happening right now. And it makes me hopeful for the future, because I think that so many people are choosing to kind of dig a bit deeper and look into things a bit more, even though it's scary. And I guess that's kind of what nousana does. We help people through that transition because it is It can be quite isolating, especially when the people around you might not be on the same journey as you. Um, so yeah, that can be quite a challenge to navigate because at some point you feel like you're going mad. Um, and then you kind of, like you said before, you end up finding and linking up with other people who've also done their own research, and you start to think, oh, so it's not me. Like, so, something happened and it changed me.
And this is where we come back to this being responsible for oneself, and this the sovereign is really looking at what you're putting in your body, and that does include medication, it does include food, it includes everything. And being that sovereign is just taking control and being responsible and looking at what it is that you're doing. And like you said, there is place for modern medicine, but there's also place for herbal and natural remedies, and that is really powerful. And it's finding that bridge, it's finding which one works, because one might not necessarily work for one thing, but it will work for something else. So it's really taking that responsibility and looking. And of course, this is a conversation that we can carry on for hours. It's one of my favorite conversations, but we don't have hours, and we do appreciate that. But before we sort of slowly start to wrap up, we have what we love to call our gold nuggets. So, gold nugget is uh, something extra because we always like more. Lenka and I, we love more. This is where we ask Georgina, can we please have your gold nugget?
There was a study done at Stanford, and it was with children, and they were preschool children, and they gave all of these kids a marshmallow, and they put it on the desk in front of them, and they said, you can either have this marshmallow now, or you can wait 15 minutes and get two. And then what they did was they followed each kid based on the decision that they made. And they discovered that the children who chose to delay their gratification, they all did better in their exams. They all reported feeling happier and healthier in their lives. And I think that it can tell us a lot about delaying gratification, because in this world that we're in now, we've all become so used to everything being instant. Like you said before about hunting for food, we just go to the shop. If we want something, we'll just go and get it. And it's so instant that I think we've really lost the ability to I don't know, strengthen our willpower, I guess. But there's so much benefit in doing so. And I think kind of teaching yourself that just because you want something doesn't mean you should have it right now, and that there's a huge benefit to actually not giving it to yourself right now. I think that's I don't know, a really important part that I would want everybody to know about, because I think it's cool.
And this is why we love the gold nuggets, because we get some amazing gold nuggets. And I've read that study, or about that study with the marshmallows. So thank you for that reminder. About and the advice about instant gratification, because like you said, we do live in a world with instant gratification. We can order something online, and sometimes you can even get it at this on the same day or the next day delivery. So it is, I think, like you said, the power of holding off or not succumbing to that instant gratification. So for our listeners, they've been listening to this conversation, and they're most probably thinking, I need help, or I want to know more, or I just want to be in Georgina's circle. Where can people find you?
So the website is nousana.com. And we are on socials at We Are Nousana. And yeah, that's pretty much how you get in touch with us so far.
That's plenty. I'll make sure to include Nusana and your social media and website links in the description below so then people can go and click and find you. And definitely go ahead and follow Georgina. She shares wonderful, inspiring things on her LinkedIn, on her Instagram, videos that just make you think or remind you of something that maybe we talked about or touched on today. So thank you so much for being here. I love this conversation, and we just went on, and we could have spent another couple hours sitting. And I think this is one of first of many. We will love to have you back at some point to dive deep into certain aspects of your experience, of your journey. But as Natalie said, we're a little greedy on this podcast, and we're always trying to squeeze in one last question. And because the mission of the podcast, our kind of manifesto says that we're looking for ways to have happily, healthily, more fulfilling lives, and we're looking for ways to lean more into our lives. So I'm always curious, what gives you life right now?
Right this second is talking to you guys in the sun. That's what's giving me life right this second. Yeah, I mean, what more could I possibly want? I've got a beautiful home, a roof over my head, food in the cupboard. Um, I'm surrounded by wonderful friends and an exciting future ahead. So yeah, there's so much giving me life right now.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, like Lenka says, we do always like to have that little bit extra. So thank you so much for sharing. We really do appreciate your time and energy because it does take time to have a conversation and it does require energy. But yours has been a really beautiful energy, beautiful smile. And it's lovely to see the sun on your face and to see you sitting in that sunlight. So thank you so much for sharing your day, your time with us.
Thank you guys so much. This has been a really lovely experience, and I'm so grateful that you had me on today. Thank you for listening and for talking to me. It's been wonderful.
And for our listeners, what have you got from this conversation today? Have you been down that rabbit hole and seen some things that you just blew your mind? Or are you starting down that rabbit hole and thinking, I am alone. Am I the only person doing this? No, you're not. There's more people out there. And we would just love to know what aha moments have you got from this? What have you got from this conversation? It's been in some ways, a familiar conversation, but in some ways, it's been a really different conversation. We would love to know your thoughts and maybe share with us what you found down your rabbit hole, because everybody's rabbit hole is different. We'd love to know your thoughts. And until next time, we'll chat to you soon. Bye.